Well, this is the third week of April. Today finds me in southwest New Hampshire. And we got some increasing sunshine today, some blue skies with some cumulus clouds, and quite breezy and quite cool in the upper 30s right now, highs in the mid 40s today. So we'll dress for the weather and explore the Wapack National Wildlife Refuge. This is a couple thousand acres of land here owned by the U.S. government. And what's called Pack Monadnock Mountain occupies this land on the north end of the Wapack Trail, which starts at the Massachusetts border and comes north about 25 miles. So we'll be exploring the northern end of the Wapack Trail to North Pack Monadnock Mountain and making a loop on the Cliff Trail, possibly. There's a few other trails that aren't on this map that I might explore as well. The south end of Pack Monadnock Mountain is part of Miller State Park, operated by the state of New Hampshire. Don't think I'm going to have time to get all the way down to the south end of Pack Monadnock Mountain. I've got about 6 hours to explore this area. I'd like to give the North Pack Monadnock Mountain and some of the side trails off of it, including the Cliff Trail, Ted's Trail, and Carolyn's Trail, a good looking over, as well as the main Wapack Trail, which is shown in black on this map, and a yellow triangle on the trees. You got about 1,000 feet of elevation gain. It's quite rocky at the top, and as advertised to have many views. I've never been on this mountain or any of the other mountains in this area. The big brother to Pack Monadnock Mountain is Monadnock Mountain itself, which is supposedly the second most climbed mountain in the entire world. It's got excellent views and is close to major population centers in southern New England. We'll continue on and see what unfolds along the Wapack Trail. And one of the more common evergreen trees in southern and central New England and northern New England is the white pine. I always try to make a point of really looking over the satellite views of all these parks to see what I could expect to find as far as rock formations. Sometimes waterfalls will show up on the satellite views that aren't advertised, and the forest type, especially if the satellite view was taken in the winter time. The view of this mountain was taken in the summer, but it was still obvious there was a lot of spruce trees on top of this mountain. It's a much darker shade of green than the white pine or the hardwood trees that are in leaf at that time. Here's the remnants of a white pine tree, kind of interesting looking, all bleached. And what's coming in at about 1,400 foot elevation here is the saplings of some red spruce trees. So again, those are showing up on the summit of the mountain. It looks like almost the top half of this mountain and the northwest half of this mountain, it's a little cooler and protected from the heat of the summer. That part of the mountain is showing up as dominated by what appears to be red spruce, perhaps maybe a little balsam fir. We'll see if there's some up there. Usually the red spruce is one of the more northern coniferous trees in central and northern New England, but it's the one that you find lower down, and the balsam fir shows up a little further up the mountain normally. And as you get further up into the White Mountains and the higher mountains in New Hampshire, you find exclusively spruce, the spruces and the balsam fir, and the red pine and the white pine disappear. So here's our red spruce, and much shorter needles than any of the pines. And the needles are considerably shorter than those of a balsam fir, and they're also not as flat as those of a balsam fir or eastern hemlock or Canadian yew, which is often in the understory of these woods as well. So the tree is pretty easy to identify. On my Barking Up the Right Tree channel last summer, I did a side-by-side comparison of black spruce and red spruce that helps you identify them where the two are found side by side. I wouldn't expect to find black spruce up here unless there's a bog but you never know till you look. So let's keep hiking up in elevation. We're at about 1,400 feet here. The summit's about 2,300. And I expect to find a lot more spruce and probably a lot less pine as we go up, but we'll see what comes along as it comes along. And as you do hike along, you might as well just spend some time looking at these red spruce trees, because I think we're going to see a lot of them on the north side of this mountain. If you're not familiar with the red spruce, again, higher elevations, this is one of the more common evergreens. There's this bark that has a pattern that resembles small potato chips, about 1 inch in size, and it retains that pattern throughout its life, and they can get quite large. Many of the populations of virgin spruce trees were removed from these mountains because it makes excellent building materials. And a nice little rivulet coming down the mountain. We're only about 10 minutes into the walk so far. Let's just enjoy this peaceful scenery. There's a snowstorm that hit western New England and upstate New York yesterday, and I asked one of the other hikers if there was snow up top, and he said no, but there was some ice. So didn't think of grabbing my ice cleats this late in the winter, but we'll see if we can avoid it. It might be interesting to look at as we go. And as you could see in that last video, the soil has gotten thin and rocky, and in places lacking in canopy. There's a song called Strawberry Fields Forever, and in some of these mountains is Blueberry Fields Forever. But that's not what we're looking at right here. There is some blueberry up here, but what I'm seeing here is a you know, if you were to walk around the world in the northern hemisphere, you can find this tree or shrub around the world. This is called common juniper, and it's related to red cedar, and could be mistaken for red cedar, but it's a slightly different needle. And the needle I'm almost mistook it for hemlock once when I wasn't expecting to find it. The needles are about the size of a hemlock needle, but they're much pointier, and yes, it hurts if you touch it. And in New England here, it often attains a shrub form, but not a tree form, but in other parts of the world, it can attain a tree form, including in the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevada. So these thin soils often lead to plants that we don't find in the mature forest or forest with a canopy, including what looks like some gray birch growing right up here. And gray birch is often found in areas of early succession along roadsides and in old fields and abandoned agricultural lands. But if none of that were available, this is where you would find it, in these areas that have full sun. And we'll see if we can get a better look at it in just a few minutes here. And again, from studying those satellite views of this area, I am expecting to find a lot of open ledge in addition to the spruce forest that we've already started to see. So where the spruce forest doesn't exist, there's plenty of open ledge, especially on the top of this mountain, where we can find some plants that normally wouldn't grow where the forest has had time to develop. And they got our spruce cones here on the left with a white pine cone in the center of the screen and a little bit more red spruce cones on the right. And our hemlock cones, if there were any right here, would be quite a bit smaller than these spruce cones. As a matter of fact, I think I got one right here. So at the bottom of the screen there is our eastern hemlock, red spruce in the middle, and white pine at the top. Saw a couple red pine trees on the way up here. Not enough to do any videos of, but Some of them may show up as you get to the more exposed areas of this mountain. Here's our gray birch as you would find it, let's say in pre-industrial or pre-European settlement times, when the only open habitat for a sun-loving pioneer species would be these ledges that probably burn on a regular basis, creating the open area for this gray birch. And looks like there's some common juniper here that's died back, possibly from brush fires. And yes, blueberry fields forever. So as we get to the more open areas of this mountain, we're going to get some views, and we're going to start seeing some different plants as well. And we will just take a minute to look at the gray birch. When it's growing in old agricultural land, it tends to grow straight. It can grow in clumps, but it's often by itself. And it can be mistaken for paper birch, which has often the same color white bark. Our gray birch does not peel like the paper birch. And the branches tend to be a little bit more dark where they come out, and often the smaller gray birches actually have the gray color. So white is a color it gets, but it can be gray. At least some of the smaller saplings can, and it does not peel like the paper birch. And there is paper birch on this mountain, and I like to do side-by-side comparisons, and if I can find a place where both are growing next to each other, I will do that. Well, certainly all that glitters is not gold, but it's still interesting to look at as you're hiking. We've got some mica flakes in this rock on the sides of North Pack Monadnock Mountain. It's a common mineral in the metamorphic rocks of New England. Found it on many of the hikes. And we got more of this gray birch here. And more common juniper. And yes, the views start to unfold. We're about a mile into a mile and a half ascent of this mountain. And there's many more trails that I will explore once I'm to the summit, as much as time allows. Got some rock cairns up here. And any indication that the stone wall would be that this was somebody's agricultural land at one time. It may have been used for grazing sheep. That would explain the thin soil up here, if it was overgrazed or grazed too much. Or maybe just to demarcate the property boundaries. And normally when you get high enough up in these mountains, the stone walls disappear because it never really was suitable for any kind of agriculture, including grazing. But in this case, we're not that high in elevation. It certainly could have been grazed if there was much to be found up here besides what we see today. And just about 10 minutes past those fields of blueberries and common juniper and gray birch, what I saw on the satellite view for the top third of this mountain is coming into clear view as I hike, and that is a forest that's almost dominated by red spruce. You got the cones all over the place on the ground here. And that bark that resembles small potato chips or like corn chip sized flakes. Again, this is thin rocky soil, and if there's a lot of spruce here, this may have not been grazed or burned like the areas with the gray birch and the common juniper. It certainly gives you that North Woods feel, and we're only at 1,900 feet. And often you can find some of the more southern trees at that elevation if the habitat is different. But this thin soil is a good place for a red spruce to survive. It has shallow roots that can obtain a living just by coming out instead of going down into the rocks. And most evergreen trees share that character trait. And the red spruce cones that I was expecting to find on the top third of this mountain are littering the forest floor. Most of them are about an inch, maybe an inch and a half long, about as big as the top half of my forefinger there. Top half of my thumb. So that satellite view was correct. And it definitely looked like mostly evergreen trees up here that weren't pines. The look of a pine from above is different than that of a spruce or a balsam fir. So boy, it's got a north woods feel. We're not that high in elevation. I've been in hikes further north than this, where at this elevation it's still mostly what they call northern hardwoods. Sugar maple, yellow birch. But up here, this is almost all red spruce up here, with an occasional northern red oak in the mix, actually. So, as I mentioned on Shattuck Mountain in March of this year, northern red oak is one of the last oaks you find as you come north in the Appalachian Mountains. It's found higher up and further north than the other oaks. I know there's more views to be had, and we'll see what other unusual or interesting plants or rocks or animals we can find on our way up here. And between these groves of spruce trees, we must have had some blowdown in the last few years. Created a nice little opening between these trees. Let's take a look to the east. This is called Pack Monadnock Mountain, but Monadnock is not a specific term for this mountain or Mount Monadnock, but a geographical term to describe any mountain that sticks up higher than the surrounding lowlands or lands that aren't as high but maybe still hilly, and that's the case with central New England here. Plenty of hilly land, but the Monadnocks stand up by themselves. Usually it's a harder rock that's more resistant to erosion. And Pack Monadnock Mountain here, and Monadnock Mountain itself, and Wachusett Mountain, and Wapack Mountain are all Monadnocks within a few miles of here. And as we look east, we can see some that I'm not aware of the name of. Well, the wind is dying down, the overcast is breaking up, the cumulus cloud deck is breaking up, and if we're lucky, we can get a view to much more distant locations when we get to the summit here. And the red spruce continues almost exclusively the last half mile to the summit of North Pack Monadnock Mountain. But where the rock ledge is open, there's plenty of views. So let's see what we can see from this first overlook, and we'll keep poking around here for a few more hours and see what else we can see. Looking west, some of the ski areas in southern Vermont that are still either open or at least covered in snow the third week in April here are in clear view. I might need to get out the compass to figure out which ones we're looking at here. I believe the one in the center of the screen there could be Mount Snow, with the satellite facility to its south. I think that's called Corinthia. And north of that could be the east face of Stratton Mountain. We'll see if we can get some other views of ski slopes as we continue along here. There's plenty of ski areas in this area. A lot of them are no longer in use. This Wapack Trail, we just corrected on the pronunciation. It's not Wapack, but Wapack Trail and Wapack Mountain, Wapack Wildlife Refuge originates at Mount Wapack to the south and continues north to this location where we started today. And that Wapack Trail starts on the south slopes of Mount Wapack, and there used to be a ski area on the north face of Mount Wapack. It also goes right over Temple Mountain, which had a ski area at one time. We'll continue on, see if we can get some views in all directions as the slopes open up. And as advertised, the wind is subsiding and the sunshine is increasing. And today is one of those days where the only thing that's going to limit your view is your time to find places to get the view, or mountains or trees that may be blocking that view. So let's take a look to the southeast here. We've come off the summit. We're off of the Wapack Trail. We're on what's called the Cliff Trail. And that does make a triangular shape along the southeast face of this mountain and rejoins the Wapack Trail. Carolyn's Trail comes up from the road to the north. And I didn't climb up that trail, but it could be done as well. It doesn't look too heavily used, but it does lead to this little overlook here with a great view. So my plan is to stay on the Cliff Trail. I may not do the whole loop. I may just go out and back. But again, the satellite view is cueing us in as to what we could find. And there's large outcrops there with some talus and some areas to explore, looking for some different plants, maybe some animals, maybe some porcupines. You never know what you're going to find in these mountains. That's a pretty nice view there, folks. Again, we're looking at some of the smaller monadnocks to our east. Harder rocks that resisted erosion, and then it gets more gently rolling as you get down towards Manchester and northeast Massachusetts. And I do not see Boston from this vantage point, but I'm sure that it can be seen from some of these vantage points. We're not quite southeast enough in our view here to see the skyline of Boston, but we'll be on the lookout for that as time allows today. Got an hour and a half to spend on the summit up here before I need to start heading back north on the Wapack Trail. And one thing I've learned over years of hiking, you start seeing unofficial trails, follow them, because usually there's a reason they're there. And we just came off the Cliff Trail on an unofficial trail. We're getting some really wide open ledges here with better views than you can actually achieve from the summit of North Pack Monadnock Mountain. We're about maybe a half-mile east of that on the Cliff Trail. And got plenty more of this common juniper, which is common on this hike. Not everywhere, but there's been quite a bit of it. And actually some northern red oak in a scrub form up here. It's only 20 feet high, maybe 25 feet high. I believe it's northern red. That's what I'm seeing evidence of on the ground. I think we're a little too far inland and a little too far north for scarlet oak or black oak. I believe that's what we're finding here, and I'm hoping we can get a view to Boston here. Let's take a look. We got a wide open ledge over here. Yes, I do see the skyline of Boston. So again, these unofficial trails are here for a reason. I'm being careful not to damage the vegetation up here where I put my feet, trying to walk on the rocks and not on the lichens or even the blueberry bushes. Let's pause for just a second. And yes, there's a view, extensive view to the southeast from this ledge, and I'm looking down below me here, and there's several other routes that come up this mountain. I believe I'm looking at one right now because it's all packed down like a heavily used trail just below me. So I don't have the map in front of me to tell you which trail that is, but I could say most of the trails coming up this mountain from any direction will have views. If you have time to really look around, you have a half a day or most of the day, you could find incredible views on a day this clear. So let's zoom into the skyline of Boston. And yes, there were views to the White Mountains today. It was just enough clouds up there. I couldn't really make them out clearly. If it clears out a little bit more on the return leg of this trip, I'll try to record the White Mountains to our north. But the view to Boston is quite clear right now. It's a good 40-50 miles away. Those skyscrapers in the background there is the skyline of Boston. I'm not making out the Atlantic Ocean, even though it is in Boston. It just isn't quite visible. The buildings themselves are probably just tall enough to clear the hills that block the view of the ocean from here. That's about as much zooming as this camera will do. But many of the mountains in this area have clear views in many directions because they are geological monadnocks. And that makes for incredible scenic rewards with not always a lot of hiking. It really didn't take that long to climb up here. If I hadn't been stopping, I could have done it in an hour easily. Rocky in places, ledgy in places, but nothing that you had to scramble or do hand over foot. You could do it, you know, without using your hands, and most of the trails I've done at least, but there's many more I won't get to today. This North Pack Monadnock Mountain, great place to explore. Hundreds of thousands of people climb Monadnock Mountain just west of here. And I'm sure this gets a fair amount of use, but the parking lot probably only holds 20 or 30 cars, so that would limit the use right there. And I call this channel Let's Dig a Little Deeper for that reason. I'm trying to get to lesser known places, even though this is probably quite popular. Compared to the other mountains around here, it may be, you know, lesser known. Let's keep exploring this cliff trail. I'm spending a lot of time taking photos. It's a great day for photography. I probably won't get to do the whole cliff trail. Let's give it another half hour, see if we can get some more views, and then we'll turn around and head back. Well, anybody watching this video series about the Wapack Trail and North Pack Monadnock Mountain, please take the time to come down the cliff trail. The summit of North Pack Monadnock Mountain has decent views, worth your effort. It's 1.4 miles from the parking lot on the north side of the mountain. But if you come another half a mile to 3/4 mile, you're going to get the best view that I've seen today, looking east, southeast, south, southwest, and west. That is well worth the extra time. And we're at the top of a large cliff with a scree slope on the bottom. Be great porcupine habitat. Timber rattlesnakes are almost unheard of in New Hampshire, and there aren't a lot of nut trees up here to provide the food for the rodents that the timber rattlesnakes prey on, so I wouldn't expect them to be up here. Boy, but if they did have to den up, that would be the place to do it, right down there, folks. But this is mostly red spruce with a little bit of northern red oak that, yes, would provide the food for the rodents that the timber rattlesnakes prey on. I don't believe there's any up here, but I'd be a little extra cautious on that scree slope on a warmer day. As I mentioned, at the top of this mountain, you can clearly see southern Vermont. In the third week of April, some of the ski areas are closed, but the ones that are still open have snow, man-made snow mostly, on the trails. And I do believe we're looking at Mount Snow based on our latitude. It's one of the more southerly ski areas in Vermont. And I'm not sure if that's Okemo or Stratton, or maybe there's one called Hermitage, which is privately owned. I'm not going to get out the larger map today to figure that out. I might when I get home. Looking south, we have Pack Monadnock Mountain with the radio tower on top. And if you were to hike the Wapack Trail from here to its origin, you would continue over that mountain and over this chain of low to medium-sized mountains all the way down towards what looks like ski trails on Wachusett Mountain, which is what that is. Before you get to that, there's one called Botanical Mountain, which I can still see the ski trails because I know where to look. They're hard to make out in this video, but the center of this screen is Botanical Mountain, and there are ski trails still visible on that mountain from this vantage. And that's where this 23-mile Wapack Trail terminates. Its southern terminus. And yes, we can also get another view of Boston from this viewpoint. So the one I just looked at a few minutes ago was an easterly viewpoint, southeasterly. This viewpoint is even better. and I didn't have to go off trail to find it. So there's our skyline of downtown Boston. That's a 10 times zoom. That's as much as this camera can do. Come on up here with your binoculars, come up here with your cameras, come up here on a clear day, and you'll be glad you did. We're going to turn around soon and start heading back and put the wraps on this hike. And after that expansive view to the west, southwest, south, and southeast, and east from the cliff trail, we're on our way back down the Wapack Trail towards the parking area. And we do have a much clearer view to the north now. This morning, the Presidential Range and many of the higher peaks of the White Mountains were still above cloud line. There was a lot of instability, flurries, and snow showers. Since then, I believe it's cleared out enough we can get the view if we zoom in all the way, but this is many, many miles away to our north. Let's take a look anyways. It's a beautiful view. We're right above where I recorded that common juniper on the way up. And there's plenty of it growing here along with gray birch. And when I was recording this morning, the White Mountains were not in view. I believe that's what we're looking at extremely far to the north here. All the way up to 10x here. Great views for your effort at this park. The trails I've been on have been well maintained and well marked. You have your share of roots, you have your share of bedrock ledge. Just a little slippery when wet, but moderate hiking. I wouldn't call it difficult by New England standards. I'm going to zoom in on the map. I didn't print this off this morning. And we'll zoom in on the map at the kiosk here. I think we got better lighting here. There's our scale of miles. Our cliff trail is in purple. The Wapack Trail is in black, and those are the two that we did today. So I came down south from the parking lot here on Old Mountain Road on the Wapack Trail. Made quite a few stops. Headed southeast on this purple line, which is the cliff trail. And right about here is where the cliff with the best view was. And that's right where the Ted's Trail comes in, and there's a sign there at that junction. And I did continue down this slope quite a bit more in elevation and then turned around. Probably could have continued on the loop, but I chose not to. Didn't want to run out of time. And then made my way back out. So 6 hours in the woods. I'm guessing maybe 6 miles, but it may not even have been that far. I made a lot of stops and spent a lot of time enjoying the perfect weather for making videos and taking photos. We'll continue on in a few weeks here. As spring and summer progress, heavy rains can lead to waterfall hikes. Hot weather can lead to canoe outings. And there's even some coastal islands that are within my day trip distance that I might go explore.